So the latest round of U.S. Taliban peace talks seem to have wrapped up here recently. The latest round was held in Doha, I believe is how you say it, in Qatar. And as I've been saying, I'm very optimistic on how these peace talks have been going. Of course, the U.S. side is led by neocon warhawk Zalmay Khalilzad, which may seem like a poor choice. As someone to negotiate with the Taliban. You would think that a committed neoconservative would not want peace with the Taliban even after all these years. However, he seems to have come around to the fact that the U.S. really has nothing left to gain here. And of course, it is helpful that Zalmay Khalilzad, I believe, was actually born in Afghanistan and does speak the same language as the Taliban, so he's pretty good at negotiating in that sense, since he doesn't have to go through a translator. And of course, anything that brings us closer to ending this terrible, longest war in American history is a good thing, because nothing has been gained in the 18 years that the U.S. has been fighting there. There's only been endless bloodletting, and nothing can be gained. Anyone who looks at the situation should be able to understand that. What the U.S. has been trying to institute in Afghanistan, the new government, after they overthrew the Taliban the first time, is just unworkable. It's a unitary parliamentary democracy in a country which speaks many different languages and has many different cultures spread across different geographic areas. You're not going to have essentially the same form of government as France. It's simply unreasonable to expect a country like Afghanistan, which has no unified society, to elect a single unified government to create a uniform set of laws which governs the entire country, with a uniform military and police. But of course, because the U.S. has a phobia for decentralization, because of course, if you talk about decentralization in America, you say, oh, well, that's just a system for preserving slavery and Jim Crow, which of course has nothing to do with Afghanistan. But because of that, the U.S. feels like they have to institute this unitary system, even though it's not even an American-style system. It's it's much more based on the Westminster system, it would seem, or perhaps it's closer to French semi-presidentialism. But nevertheless, whatever you call it, it's certainly foreign to Afghanistan, and it's it's a system that was designed for a very different sort of society. Frankly, if you wanted to create a stable political order in Afghanistan, you would want to give each of the various warring groups autonomy within some sort of loose confederation or association of peoples. Afghanistan is very similar to Yugoslavia, and that's why it tends to flare up as bad as it does. Yugoslavia was a collection of different tribes that all lived under the same flag, and when their strongman dictator died, they started quarreling with each other. And the same thing is true of Afghanistan. You're never going to have some peaceful democratic order where everyone gets along happily. Not unless each side is unable to oppress the other groups. If everyone's sort of kept in their own little sandbox, well, then they'd be fine. And that's why we've been able to see peace in what was Yugoslavia for the last 20 or so years. It's because Serbia and Montenegro and Bosnia and Croatia and all these countries are now their own states with their own governments and their own legislatures, and they don't have to answer to each other. And so back to the U.S. and the Taliban. The Taliban has essentially said now that they've resolved their differences with the United States, that an agreement is almost at hand, it would seem. However, we did not get any official agreement announced at this meeting or at the end of it. It would seem that there's still probably going to be some time to hammer out the exact details of it, but it's very positive that the Taliban are speaking this way. It would seem, based on what the Taliban said, that the U.S. has agreed to leave, as the Taliban wishes they will, and the Taliban has agreed not to, give safe harbor to international terrorists or anything like that again. And I'm not shocked that negotiations, went so well with the Taliban, because, frankly, they're a bunch of, herders on the Asian steppe. I don't think that they would be that tough to deal with. They just want you to get out of their country. But, of course, the Taliban do have their very unworkable opinion that they should, rule the entire country. That's something that is not a good option, just like the U.S.'s unitary parliamentary democracy. In the same way that you can't have outsiders ruling over the Taliban can't rule over outsiders. That will just lead to, endless bloodletting and instability as the people who are not a part of the Taliban's tribe, rise up against them. And of course, since the Taliban asserts that they control the whole country, they are threatening to bomb polling stations at the next Afghan presidential election, which is coming up soon. So it'll be interesting to see if whatever happens in the presidential election changes or disrupts the pathway to peace between the U.S. and the Taliban, or if perhaps a deal is announced before then so that the Taliban does not act out in any sort of violent way. All in all, I'm still very optimistic, and I hope that old Khalilzad is able to pull through for us and gets the boys home, because as I've said, as many people have said, as many folks said before Afghanistan was ever invaded, you're never going to achieve anything in the graveyard of empires. And so if you gained anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and subscribing. And if you do subscribe, please do click the bell, because I do upload every day and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.